fixing clothes, and her back hurt from hunching over the sewing machine since early morning. The old building creaked around her as she swept fabric scraps into a dustpan. 3 white envelopes sat on her counter like unwelcome guests. She knew what they were without opening them. Rent notices, each one more urgent than the last. The landlord had already called twice this week, his voice getting less friendly each time. Rosa looked around her tiny shop. It wasn't much to look at. The paint was peeling in the corners and the fluorescent light flickered when the wind blew too hard. But it was hers. Well, sort of. She'd built this business from nothing after her world fell apart 8 years ago. Her phone buzzed against the counter, making her jump. The screen showed a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it. People rarely called this late unless something was wrong. The clock on the wall showed 8:30 p.m. when Rosa finally started cleaning up her small shop. Her fingers ached from a long day of, "Hello?" she answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued sweeping. "Hi, is this Rosa's Alterations?" The voice belonged to a man who sounded stressed and out of breath. "Yes, but we're closed for the day. I open again at 9 tomorrow morning. Please, I know this sounds crazy, but I really need help. I have this huge meeting tomorrow morning and I just tore my suit. My regular place is closed and I called everywhere else. You were the only shop that answered." Rosa paused her sweeping. She could hear the desperation in his voice, but she was exhausted. All she wanted was to go home to her daughter and make sure she took her medicine before bed. "I'm sorry, but I was just closing up. If you can bring it by first thing tomorrow, I'll pay extra, whatever you think is fair. This meeting could change everything for me." Rosa bit her lip. She thought about those rent notices, about the pharmacy bill that came yesterday, about how her daughter had asked for new shoes last week, and Rosa had to tell her to wait until next month. "How bad is the tear?" she asked. "Pretty bad. Right down the back seam of the jacket, and there's a small rip near the pocket too." Rosa looked at the clock again. If she worked fast, she could probably fix it in a couple of hours. That would put her home around midnight, but the extra money would help with at least one of those bills. "Okay," she said, surprising herself. "But I'll need you to bring it over right now. I can't stay open too late." "Really? Thank you so much. I'm about 20 minutes away. I'll be right there." After hanging up, Rosa wondered if she'd made a mistake. She didn't know this person. For all she knew, he could be dangerous, but something in his voice reminded her of herself during those dark days after Luis died. The sound of someone trying to hold it together when everything was falling apart. She turned the lights back on and got her sewing kit ready. The familiar weight of her scissors felt comforting in her hands. These were the same tools her grandmother had taught her to use when she was just 12 years old, sitting on a wooden stool in their small apartment. "Mija," her grandmother used to say, "these hands can create magic if you treat them right. Remember that when life gets hard." 23 minutes later, headlights swept across her shop window. Rosa watched as a sleek black car pulled up to see the curb. The kind of car she used to see in the parking garage of her old office building. Before everything changed, the driver's door opened, and a tall man in an expensive-looking shirt stepped out. Even in the dim streetlight, she could tell his clothes cost more than she made in a month. He carried a garment bag carefully, like it held something precious. Rosa unlocked the door as he approached. Up close, she could see he was probably in his 40s, with gray starting to show at his temples. His face had the tired look of someone who worked too many hours and drank too much coffee. "You must be Rosa," he said, extending his hand. "I'm David Chen. Thank you for staying open. I know this is asking a lot." His handshake was firm, but not aggressive. Rosa had learned to read people quickly in her old job, and this man seemed genuine. Stressed, but not threatening. "Let me see what we're dealing with," she said, gesturing for him to come inside. David unzipped the garment bag and carefully pulled out a navy blue suit jacket. Rosa could immediately see the problem. The back seam had split open about 6 inches, probably from sudden movement. There was also a smaller tear near the inside pocket where something sharp had caught the fabric. She held the jacket up to the light, examining the weave and construction. It was beautiful work. Hand-stitched details that you rarely saw anymore. The kind of craftsmanship that took real skill and patience. "This is a nice piece," she said, running her fingers along the lapel. "Italian?" David looked surprised. "Yes, actually, how did you know?" "The stitching pattern, and the way the fabric drapes. My grandmother worked for families who wore clothes like this back in Mexico. She taught me to recognize quality." David watched as Rosa laid the jacket on her work table, smoothing out the fabric with practiced movements. She could feel him studying, her shop probably wondering how someone in a place like this could know about expensive suits. "You said this meeting is important?" Rosa asked, threading her needle with matching navy thread. "Very important. I'm trying to save my company from being taken over by people who don't care about our employees. If tomorrow goes badly, a lot of good people will lose their jobs." Rosa nodded, focusing on making her first stitch perfectly straight. She understood, about fighting to keep what mattered, about doing everything possible to protect the people depending on you. "How long have you had the company?" she asked, settling into the rhythm of sewing. 15 years. Started it right out of college with my best friend. We built it from nothing." David's voice softened. "He died 3 years ago, car accident. Now it's just me trying to keep his dream alive." Rosa's hands paused for just a moment. She knew about losing someone who shared your dreams, about suddenly being responsible for everything alone. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, then continued, "Stitching. That must be very hard. Some days are better than others, but I can't let what we built just disappear. Too many people are counting on me." As Rosa worked, David found himself relaxing for the first time in weeks. There was something calming about watching her hands move with such confidence and skill. Each stitch was perfect, placed exactly where it needed to be. "You've been doing this a long time," he observed. "Since I was a child," my grandmother said. "Good hands never go hungry." She was right about that. David looked around the small shop again, noticing details he'd missed before. Awards on the wall from the local business association. Photos of Rosa with customers at what looked like weddings and graduations. A child's drawing taped to the mirror that said, "Best Mama Ever," in purple crayon. "You have a daughter?" he asked. Rosa smiled, the first real smile she'd had all day. "Isabella. She's 10. Smart as a whip and twice as stubborn as me." "That's a good combination." "Most days," Rosa laughed, "though it keeps me on my toes." The shop fell into comfortable silence except for the soft sound of needle pulling through fabric. Outside, the city was winding down, but inside Rosa's small space, something important was being carefully put back together. Rosa worked steadily for the next hour, her needle moving in precise, even strokes. David had settled into an old chair, near her work table, checking his phone less frequently as time passed. The constant buzz of notifications seemed to stress him out, so he eventually turned it face down. "You don't have to stay," Rosa said without looking up from her work. "I can call you when it's ready." "I know, but I'm too wired to sleep anyway. My mind keeps racing about tomorrow." David rubbed his temples. "Besides, it's fascinating watching you work. You make it look so easy." Rosa smiled slightly. 28 years of practice. My grandmother used to say that hands remember what the mind forgets. Once you learn something this deep in your bones, it becomes part of you." She finished reinforcing the back seam and moved on to the smaller tear near the pocket. This one required more delicate work, carefully matching the existing thread pattern so the repair would be invisible. "Where did you learn to do this?" David asked. "I mean professionally. This isn't just hobby-level skill." Rosa paused, considering how much to share. Most customers didn't ask personal questions. They dropped off their clothes, paid their bill, and left. But something about this late-night situation felt different, more honest somehow. "I actually learned twice," she said, resuming her stitching. "First from my grandmother when I was young, then again in fashion school, where they taught me the technical side. After that, I worked for a big company for several years. Fashion. Company? Which one? You probably wouldn't know it. Corporate fashion isn't the same as what you see in stores. We designed clothes for executives, politicians, people who needed to look powerful. Rosa's voice got quieter. I was good at it, too. Had my own office, assistant, the whole thing. David straightened up in his chair. What happened? I mean, if you don't mind me asking. Rosa set down her needle for a moment and looked at David. His expression was curious but not judgmental. She'd learned to spot the difference over the years. Life happened, she said simply. My husband Luis got sick. Cancer. The treatments were experimental and expensive, and our insurance only covered part of it. I used up all my savings, took out loans, sold everything we had. She picked up her needle again, finding comfort in the familiar motion. The worst part was the time. Corporate jobs don't stop for sick family members. I had meetings I couldn't miss, deadlines that wouldn't wait. Luis needed someone with him during treatments, and Isabella was only 2 years old. That must have been impossible, David said softly. It was. I tried to do everything perfectly. Be the perfect employee, perfect wife, perfect mother. But perfect isn't real. Something had to give. Rosa's hands continued working even as her voice grew thick with emotion. I chose family, took a leave of absence that turned into quitting. By the time Luis died, we had nothing left except debt and each other. The shop fell silent except for the gentle sound of fabric being mended. David found himself thinking about his own choices over the years. How many dinners he'd missed, how many important moments he'd sacrificed for business success. I'm sorry, he said. That's an incredible sacrifice. Not really, Rosa replied, examining her work. I got 8 more months with my husband and got to be there for my daughter when she needed me most. The fancy job was just a job. Family is everything. She held up the jacket, checking the repairs in the light. The back seam looked perfect, stronger than before. The pocket repair was completely invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. But you're obviously talented, David continued. Couldn't you have gone back to corporate work after things settled? Rosa laughed, but there was no bitterness in it. With an 8-year gap in my resume and a mountain of debt, corporate America doesn't exactly welcome back people who chose family over career. Besides, I had a little girl who'd already lost her father. She needed stability, not a mother who traveled constantly and worked 60-hour weeks. She started, pressing the jacket with her old iron, working carefully around the buttons and seams. So I came back to what my grandmother taught me. Honest work with honest pay. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. And I'm here when Isabella gets home from school. David watched her work, thinking about his own company. How many employees had he lost over the years to similar situations? How many talented people had he failed to support when life got complicated? You know, he said slowly, what you just described, about balancing work and family, that's exactly what I'm fighting for tomorrow. Rosa looked up from her ironing. How do you mean? The company trying to take us over, they're all about cutting costs and maximizing profits. First thing they'll do is eliminate our family-friendly policies. No more flexible schedules, no more working from home when kids are sick, no more paid family leave. David's voice grew passionate. We have people who've been with us for years because we treat them like human beings, not just resources. That's rare, Rosa said, genuinely impressed. Most companies talk about work-life balance but don't actually support it. My business partner, the one who died, his wife had a difficult pregnancy with their second child. He needed to be home, a lot during those months. I covered for him without question because that's what you do for family, and our employees are family. Rosa finished with the iron and held up the jacket for final inspection. The repairs were flawless. In fact, the jacket looked better than when David had brought it in. She'd made tiny adjustments to the fit, improvements, that would make it hang more naturally on his shoulders. It's ready, she said, offering it to him. David slipped on the jacket and looked at himself in the old mirror Rosa had mounted on the wall. The fit was perfect. Better than perfect, actually. It felt like the jacket had been made specifically for him. "This is incredible," he said, turning to see the back. "How did you know to adjust the shoulders like that?" "Experience. I could tell, from how you were carrying yourself, that the original fit was putting stress on your posture. Small changes make a big difference." David continued admiring the work in the mirror. "I feel like I could conquer the world in this jacket." "That's the idea," Rosa smiled. "Confidence starts with feeling comfortable in your own skin, or in this case, your own suit." She moved to the cash register, an old mechanical model that had seen better days. "The repair work comes to $200. The emergency service fee brings it to $250 total." David pulled out his wallet and counted out $500 bills. "Keep the change. You've done way more than just fix a tear." Rosa stared at the money. "I can't take this much. The work wasn't worth $500. "Yes, it was," David said firmly. "Look, I know what quality costs. I've paid 3 times this much for alterations that weren't half as good. You saved my presentation, tomorrow, and probably my company too." Rosa reluctantly took the money but only counted out what they'd agreed on. She held the rest back to him. "This is what we agreed on. I don't take charity." "It's not charity. It's payment for exceptional work by a skilled professional." David pushed her hand back gently. "Besides, you told me family comes first. Use it for Isabella." Rosa looked at the extra money in her hand. It would cover Isabella's medicine for 3 months. Maybe even those new shoes she'd been wanting. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This means more than you know." David buttoned up the jacket one more time, checking the fit. "No, thank you. You've given me exactly what I needed for tomorrow, and not just the suit repair." As he headed for the door, Rosa called after him. "Good luck with your meeting. Remember what I told you about confidence." "I will," David smiled. "And Rosa, you're wasted in this little shop. Someone with your skills should be running the whole fashion industry." After he left, Rosa locked the door and turned off the lights. As she drove home, she couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. It had been a long time since someone had talked to her about business and treated her like she had valuable insights to offer. When she checked on Isabella that night, her daughter was sleeping peacefully, clutching the stuffed rabbit Luis had given her before he died. Rosa kissed her forehead and whispered a promise that things were going to get better. She had no idea how much better they were about to become. 3 days passed before David could stop thinking about his conversation with Rosa. The presentation had gone better than he'd ever imagined. Walking into that boardroom wearing the perfectly fitted jacket, he'd felt different, more confident, more capable. The investors had noticed too, commenting on his polished appearance before they'd even started talking numbers. His company was safe for now. The hostile takeover had been stopped, at least temporarily. But something else was bothering him. Something he couldn't quite shake. That night in Rosa's shop had left him with questions he couldn't answer. "Find out everything you can about Rosa Martinez," he told his assistant Jennifer on Thursday morning. "The woman who owns Rosa's Alterations on 5th Street. Jennifer looked puzzled. "The tailor? Is there a problem with the work she did?" "No, the opposite. Just run a background check. Education, work history, everything you can legally find, too." Hours later, Jennifer knocked on his office door with a thick folder in her hands. Her expression was troubled. "You're going to want to sit down for this," she said, placing the folder on his desk. David opened it and started reading. The first page showed Rosa's educational background. Bachelor's degree in business administration from Northwestern University, graduating magna cum laude. Master's degree in fashion merchandising from the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. His eyebrows went up. The second page listed her work experience. Assistant buyer at Nordstrom right out of college. Senior merchandiser at Calvin Klein after graduate school. Then the big one that made David's jaw drop. Senior Vice President of Corporate Fashion at Meridian Executive Wear. "Meridian Executive Wear," David said out loud. "That's where we get all our corporate uniforms." "Keep reading," Jennifer said grimly. David flipped to the next page. Rosa hadn't just worked at Meridian. She'd been their rising star, credited with increasing their corporate division profits by 40% in just 3 years. Industry magazines had featured her as one of the top 30 under 30 business leaders to watch. She'd been on track to become the youngest VP in company history. Then, suddenly her career had stopped. The last entry showed her taking an extended leave of absence 8 years ago. After that, nothing except a small business license for Rosa's alterations. "There's more," Jennifer said, pointing to a newspaper clipping at the bottom of the file. "I found this in the business archives." David read the headline, "Meridian Executive Wear Loses Key Leader to Family Crisis." The article was brief, mentioning that Rosa Martinez had resigned from her position to care for a terminally ill family member. It praised her contributions to the company and wished her well. What the article didn't mention, but David could piece together from the timeline, was that Rosa had given up a 6-figure salary and a PR, OMASing career right when her family needed money the most. She'd walked away from everything she'd worked for to take care of her husband and daughter. David closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. The woman who had humbly charged him $250 for expert work had once been making more money than most of his department heads. She'd had skills and experience that could transform any fashion company, and she was wasting away in a tiny shop, barely scraping by. "Sir?" Jennifer asked. "Is everything all right?" "Cancel my lunch meeting," David said, standing up abruptly. "I need to go somewhere." 20 minutes later, David walked into Rosa's shop. She was working on a wedding dress, carefully beading the bodice with tiny pearls. When she looked up and saw him, surprise flickered across her face. "David? Is something wrong with the jacket?" "No, the jacket is perfect. I actually came to talk to you about something else." He gestured to the chair he'd sat in a few nights ago. "Do you have a few minutes?" Rosa set down her beading and gave him her full attention. "Of course. What's on your mind?" David had practiced this conversation during the drive over, but now that he was here, he wasn't sure how to start. "I did some research on you," he said finally. Rosa's expression didn't change, but her hand stilled. "I see. Meridian Executive Wear. Senior Vice President. 40% profit increase." David watched her face carefully. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rosa was quiet for a long moment, then she sighed. "Because it doesn't matter anymore. That was a different life, a different person. This is who I am now. But it does matter. Rosa, you're one of the most qualified fashion executives in the city, and you're working out of a shop that's barely staying afloat. I'm working out of a shop that lets me be home when my daughter needs me," Rosa corrected. "That lets me control my own schedule and make my own decisions. That's worth more than any corporate title." David leaned forward. "What if you could have both?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if there was a way to use your skills and experience while still having the flexibility you need for Isabella?" Rosa shook her head. "David, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I've been down this road. Corporate America doesn't work that way. You're either all in or you're out. Not all companies are like that. Enough of them are. Look, I know. You mean well, but I learned my lesson. I chose my priorities and I'm at peace with that choice." David stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the busy street. "What if I told you my company was looking for a director of product development? Someone to oversee our corporate fashion division? I'd say you're being kind, but I'm not interested. What if I told you the position came with complete schedule, flexibility, the ability to work from home when needed, and a child care allowance?" Rosa paused in her beading. "I'd say that sounds too good to be true. What if I told you the salary was twice what you made at Meridian?" Now Rosa looked up sharply. "David, what are you really saying?" He turned back to face her. "I'm saying my company needs someone like you. We have a fashion division that's been struggling for 2 years. We make corporate uniforms, executive wear, the kind of high-end business clothing you specialized in. But we've been playing catch-up with companies like Meridian instead of leading the market. And you think I could change that?" "I know you could. Your track record speaks for itself. But more than that, you understand something my current team doesn't. which is that the people wearing these clothes are human beings with real lives, not just walking billboards. You know what it's like to need flexibility, to have priorities outside of work. That perspective could revolutionize how we approach corporate fashion. Rosa set down her beating entirely and really looked at David. You're serious about this? Completely serious. I saw what you did with my jacket in a few hours with basic tools. Imagine what you could accomplish with a full design team and unlimited resources. David, I've been out of that world for 8 years. The industry has changed. Technology, trends, everything is different now. Fashion fundamentals don't change. Quality craftsmanship doesn't change. Understanding what makes people feel confident in their clothes doesn't change. You have those skills in your bones. Rosa was quiet for several minutes, her mind racing. The logical part of her wanted to say no immediately. She'd built a safe, predictable life. Isabella was happy and healthy. Why risk disrupting that? But another part of her, a part she'd buried 8 years ago, was stirring to life. The part that had loved the challenge of building something bigger than herself. The part that had thrived on innovation and creative problem-solving. I'd want to keep this shop, she said slowly. Of course. And I'd need to start part-time. I won't abandon Isabella's routine. We can work around whatever schedule you need. And if it doesn't work out, if the corporate culture is toxic or the demands become unreasonable, I walk away. No questions asked. Agreed. Rosa stood up and walked to the old mirror where David had admired his repaired jacket a few days earlier. She looked at herself honestly. The woman in the reflection was tired, stressed about money, worried about the future. But underneath all that, she was still the person who had revolutionized Meridian's corporate division. Still the innovator who had been featured in industry magazines. There's something else you should know, she said, still looking in the mirror. What's that? Rosa turned to face him. I didn't just leave Meridian to take care of Luis. I left because they refused to give me the flexibility I needed when he got sick. They told me I could either be committed to my career or committed to my family, but not both. That was their loss. Maybe. But it taught me something important about what I will and won't accept. If I do this, if I take this chance, it has to be different. Really different. David nodded. It will be. You have my word. Rosa looked around. Her small shop one more time. At the wedding dress waiting to be finished, at the stack of hemming jobs on her counter, at the photos of satisfied customers on her wall. This place had saved her when she had nowhere else to go. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to dream bigger again. When would you need an answer? She asked. Take all the time you need. But Rosa? David paused at the door. Don't underestimate what you're capable of. The world needs more leaders who understand that business success and human compassion aren't mutually exclusive. After he left, Rosa sat in the quiet shop for a long time, thinking about possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to imagine in years. Rosa couldn't concentrate on anything for the rest of the week. She'd mess up simple alterations that she could normally do in her sleep. Twice she had to redo hemming jobs because her mind kept wandering to David's offer. The numbers he'd mentioned kept echoing in her head. Twice what she'd made at Meridian. That kind of money could change everything for her and Isabella, but money wasn't everything. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. Friday evening, she closed the shop early and drove to pick up Isabella from her after-school program. Her daughter bounced into the car, backpack flying, full of stories about her day. Mom, guess what? Mrs. Patterson said I have the highest math scores in the whole 5th grade. And Tommy Chen asked me to be his partner for the science fair project about volcanoes. That's wonderful, baby, Rosa said, but her voice sounded distracted even to herself. Isabella studied her mother's face in the rear-view mirror. At 10 years old, she'd already learned to read her mom's moods better than most adults. Something's wrong, Isabella announced. You have your thinking face on. Rosa couldn't help but smile. My thinking face? Yeah, you get these little lines. Right here. Isabella pointed to her own forehead. And you chew on your bottom lip. You've had it all week. They stopped at a red light, and Rosa turned around to look at her daughter properly. Isabella had Luis's dark eyes and his stubborn chin, but she'd inherited Rosa's ability to see right through people. You're right. I have been thinking about something important, something that could affect both of us. Are we moving? Because I really like my school and I don't want to leave my friends. No, we're not moving. But someone offered me a job. A really good job. Isabella's eyes lit up. Like a fancy job? With an office and everything? Maybe, but it would mean some changes. I might have to work more hours sometimes, travel occasionally. The light turned green, and Rosa focused on driving while Isabella processed this information. Her daughter was quiet for several blocks, which was unusual. Isabella normally chattered nonstop during car rides. Would you be happier? Isabella asked finally. The question caught Rosa off guard. What do you mean? I mean, would this job make you happy? Because sometimes at night I hear you looking at those white envelopes on the kitchen table, the ones that make you sigh really loud. Rosa's heart clenched. She'd tried so hard to shield Isabella from their financial stress, but kids noticed everything. Those envelopes are just grown-up stuff, baby. Nothing for you to worry about. But if you took this job, would there be less of those envelopes? Rosa pulled into their apartment complex parking lot and turned off the engine. She turned around to face Isabella fully. Yes, there would probably be less of those envelopes. Maybe none at all. Isabella nodded seriously. Then I think you should take it. But what if it means I can't always be here when you get home from school? What if sometimes you have to go to the after-school program longer? Mom, I'm not a baby. I can handle staying at school longer. Besides, Mrs. Rodriguez is really nice and she helps me with my homework. Rosa unbuckled her seatbelt and reached back to squeeze Isabella's hand. When did you get so grown up? Dad always said I was an old soul in a kid's body, Isabella said, matter-of-factly. I think he'd want you to take the job if it makes you less worried all the time. That evening, after Isabella was asleep, Rosa sat at their small kitchen table with a cup of tea and her phone. She'd been staring at David's business card for 20 minutes trying to work up the courage to call him. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. Rosa looked around at their humble home. The furniture was old but clean. The walls were decorated with Isabella's artwork and photos of Luis. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her landlord. Rosa, I know you're doing your best, but I really need the rent payment. Can we talk tomorrow? Rosa stared at the message, then at the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. The pharmacy had called again about Isabella's medication costs. The car was making a strange noise that probably meant expensive repairs, and winter was coming, which meant higher heating bills. She picked up David's business card and dialed his number before she could change her mind. David? It's Rosa. I hope I'm not calling too late. Rosa, not at all. I was hoping to hear from you. Have you made a decision? I have some questions first. Real questions, not polite ones. Ask me anything. If I take this job and it doesn't work out, what happens to my reputation in the industry? If word gets around that I failed at a comeback, will other companies even consider hiring me? David was quiet for a moment. That's a fair concern. But Rosa, failure isn't trying something and not succeeding. Failure is never trying at all. Your reputation is already solid based on what you accomplished at Meridian. One opportunity not working out wouldn't change that. What about the company culture? You seem different, but what about the rest of your leadership team? Are they going to resent having someone come in from the outside? Some of them might initially. Change makes people nervous, but once they see what you can do, they'll come around. And if they don't, that's my problem to handle, not yours. Rosa took a deep breath. And if Isabella gets sick and I need to leave in the middle of an important meeting? Then you leave. Family first always. That's not just something I say. Rosa, it's how I run my company. Even if it cost you a client, even if it costs me 10 clients, the right clients will understand. The wrong ones aren't worth having anyway. Rosa stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there were opportunities she'd never allowed herself to dream about again, but also risks that could hurt not just her, But Isabella too. There's something else, she said quietly. I'm scared. Of what? Of hoping for something better and having it taken away again. Of getting comfortable and then losing everything. I've built a safe life for Isabella and me. It's not perfect, but it's predictable. Rosa, can I tell you something? The night you fixed my jacket, you saved more than just my presentation. You reminded me what real strength looks like. You've been through hell and built something meaningful from nothing. That takes courage most people never find. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like surviving. Sometimes they're the same thing. But Rosa, surviving isn't the same as living. And you're too talented, too smart, and too valuable to just survive. Rosa was quiet for a long time, thinking about Luis and the dreams they'd shared, about Isabella and the future she deserved, about the woman she used to be and the woman she could still become. If I say yes, when would I start? Whenever you're ready. We can ease into it, maybe 2 days a week at first, working around your shop schedule, see how it feels. And you'll put all those promises about flexibility in writing? Absolutely. My lawyer can draft a contract that protects both of us. Rosa closed her eyes and made a decision that would change everything. Okay, she said softly. Let's try it. Really? Rosa, that's fantastic. You won't regret this. I hope not. Because David, I'm trusting you with more than just my career. I'm trusting you with my daughter's security and my family's future. I understand the responsibility and I won't let you down. After they hung up, Rosa sat in the dark kitchen for a while, feeling a mixture of excitement and terror. She'd just agreed to step back into a world that had once broken her heart, but this time was different. This time she was older, wiser, and stronger. This time she knew exactly what mattered most. She walked to Isabella's room and watched her daughter sleep peacefully, clutching the stuffed rabbit Luis had given her. In the morning she would tell Isabella about the new adventure they were starting together. But tonight, for the first time in years, Rosa allowed herself to dream about the future instead of just worry about it. 6 months later, Rosa stood in the corner of a gleaming conference room, watching David present their latest quarterly results to the board of directors. The numbers on the screen would have seemed impossible just half a year ago. The corporate fashion division had increased profits by 68%. Customer satisfaction was at an all-time high. And they'd landed 3 major contracts that their competitors had been chasing for years. But Rosa wasn't thinking about the numbers. She was thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. Her first day at Chen Industries had been terrifying. Walking into that corporate office building after 8 years away felt like visiting another planet. The elevator was too fast, the hallways too bright, the people too polished. Rosa had seriously considered turning around and driving straight, back to her little shop. But then she'd met her team. 5 designers who were talented but frustrated, working with outdated systems and limited budgets. They'd been skeptical of her at first. After all, what could a small shop tailor teach them about corporate fashion? Everything, as it turned out. Rosa had started small, making simple changes that had big impacts. She'd insisted they actually visit client offices to see how people moved in their clothes throughout the day. She'd brought in her old contacts from the industry, craftspeople who understood that quality took time. Most importantly, she'd listened to what clients really wanted instead of just following trends. Our success this quarter isn't just about numbers, David was saying to the board. It's about changing how we think about corporate fashion. Rosa Martinez, our Director of Artisan Development, has revolutionized our entire approach. Rosa felt a familiar flutter of nerves as all eyes turned to her. Public speaking had never been her favorite part of corporate life, but she'd learned to push through the fear. Thank you, David, she said, stepping forward. When I first joined the team, I brought something that can't be taught in business school. I brought the perspective of someone who had to choose between career success and family responsibilities. She clicked to the next slide, which showed photos of their new employee programs. We discovered that our best designs came from understanding real people's real lives. So we created flexible work schedules for our design team. We added childcare support for employees with young families. We instituted a work-from-home policy that actually works. One of the board members, an older woman, in an expensive suit, leaned forward. And this improved productivity? Dramatically. When people don't have to choose between doing good work and taking care of their families, they do their best work. Our employee retention is up 40%, and our creative output has doubled. Rosa clicked to the next slide, showing their newest innovation. But our biggest breakthrough came from something completely unexpected. We started a mentorship program connecting our designers with skilled seamstresses and tailors from immigrant communities. The room erupted in interested murmurs. This program had been Rosa's idea, born from her own experience and her grandmother's stories. These craftspeople brought techniques and perspectives that our formally trained designers had never seen. We combined traditional tailoring methods with modern technology and created a line of clothing that's both innovative and timeless. David stepped back in. The Heritage Collection launched 3 months ago and is already our best-selling product line. We have a 6-month waiting list for custom pieces. After the presentation, Rosa found herself surrounded by board members asking questions and congratulating her on the results. It felt surreal. 6 months ago, she'd been worried about paying rent. Now she was being praised by some of the most successful business leaders in the city. But the moment that really mattered came later, when she picked up Isabella from school. "Mom, you look fancy today," Isabella said, climbing into the car. Rosa was still wearing her presentation outfit, a navy blue dress she'd designed herself using techniques her grandmother had taught her. "I had an important meeting today. We were talking about all the good things that have happened since I started the new job." "Are you happy you took it?" Rosa thought about the question as she drove. The job had been challenging in ways she'd forgotten were possible. There had been late nights, difficult clients, and moments when she'd doubted herself completely. But there had also been creative breakthroughs, meaningful collaborations, and the satisfaction of building something important. "Yes, baby. I'm really happy I took it." "Good. Because I have news too." Rosa glanced in the rearview mirror. Isabella was grinning in a way that usually meant she was up to something. "What kind of news?" "I won the science fair. The volcano project with Tommy? We got first place in the whole school." Rosa nearly slammed on the brakes. "Isabella, that's incredible. Why didn't you call me?" "I wanted to tell you in person. Plus, Mrs. Patterson said there might be a special prize for the winner." "What kind of special prize?" "A scholarship to science camp this summer. The expensive one that I never asked about because I knew we couldn't afford it." Rosa felt tears prick her eyes. For years, she'd watched Isabella hold back from asking for things because she understood their financial situation too well. Hearing her daughter excited about possibilities instead of worried about costs was worth more than any quarterly profit report. That evening, they celebrated with pizza and ice cream, while Isabella excitedly explained her volcano project in detail. Rosa listened, marveling at her daughter's intelligence and enthusiasm. This was what she'd been working toward all along. Not just financial security, but the freedom for both of them to dream bigger. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Amazing presentation today. Board wants to meet with you next week about something big. Are you free Friday afternoon?" Rosa texted back that she was available, then set the phone aside to focus on Isabella's stories. Friday's meeting turned out to be bigger than Rosa had imagined. The entire board was there, along with David and several executives she didn't recognize. "Rosa," David began, "your work this past 6 months has exceeded every expectation we had. The board has been discussing how to recognize your contributions properly." The chairwoman of the board, Mrs. Liu, stood up. "We'd like to offer you a partnership in the fashion division. You wouldn't just be an employee anymore. You'd be a co-owner with full decision-making authority." Rosa felt the room spinning slightly. "I'm sorry, what?" "You'd retain 51% ownership of the division, ensuring that your vision and values remain central to everything we do. The financial terms are detailed in this packet." Mrs. Liu handed over a thick envelope. "But I think you'll find them quite generous." David was beaming. "Rosa, you've built something special here, something that deserves to have your name on it permanently." Rosa opened the packet with shaking hands. The numbers inside were staggering. Not just salary, but ownership stake, profit sharing, and long-term security that would set her and Isabella up for life. But more than the money, it was the recognition of what she'd accomplished. The validation that her ideas, her experience, and her values had created something meaningful. "There's one condition," Mrs. Liu continued. "We want you to expand the program nationally. Take the mentorship model and the artisan partnerships to all our locations across the country." Rosa looked around the room at the expectant faces. 6 months ago, she'd been a struggling tailor worried about rent. Now she was being offered the chance to transform an entire industry while staying true to the values that mattered most to her. "I accept," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. The room erupted in applause and congratulations. As Rosa shook hands and accepted hugs, she thought about the night David had walked into her shop with a torn jacket. How a simple act of kindness and honest work had led to the most unexpected journey of her life. That evening, she and Isabella celebrated again, this time with plans for the future that seemed limitless. Isabella would get her science camp, her new shoes, and the security of knowing her mother's dreams had come true. "Mom," Isabella said as Rosa tucked her into bed, "do you think Dad would be proud of you?" Rosa smiled, thinking of Luis and all, the dreams they'd shared. "I think he'd be proud of both of us, baby. We never gave up even when things got really hard." As she turned off the lights, Rosa reflected on the strange way life worked. Sometimes helping a stranger led to the most incredible opportunities. Sometimes taking a risk on yourself paid off in ways you never imagined. And sometimes the skills your grandmother taught you in a small apartment could change your entire world. The poor tailor who had once worked through the night for $250 had become a successful business owner and partner. But more importantly, she'd proven that kindness, hard work, and staying true to your values could create miracles that no one saw coming.